Hi, everyone. And this is Dr. Kyra Bobinet here with Design for Health. And I'm here with my co-facilitator, my co-instructor, Dr. Larry Chu from the Stanford School of Medicine Department of Anesthesia, and also the executive director of Stanford Medicine X. Today, we are very fortunate to have our moderator, Alan Brewington. Alan Brewington is an e-patient advocate who is trying to bring awareness and attention to the commonly misunderstood disease, arthritis. His goal is to help others navigate through any form of arthritis, chronic pain, surgery, or disability while still having an active and enjoyable life. He is a rock climbing accident survivor, blogger, broken athlete, skier, and space nerd, currently employed as a premium tax accountant. And we will hear from Alan after this message from Stanford Medicine X.
If you are joining us for the first time, a quick reminder that there's a simultaneous conversation happening on Twitter right now using the hashtag MedX. Christopher Snyder is the in-class moderator for today's program and will be taking questions from social media. So please make sure to start up your Twitter client to join in the online conversation and interact with today's speakers. Christopher Snyder, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the online tweet chat discussion. We also wish to remind you that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier Patient-Centric conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. Please also make sure to follow our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Stanford Medicine X. Please note you are watching a live online program and there is a delay between real-time events and the live stream you are watching. Tweets from our in-class guests will appear before you see the real-time events they are tweeting about unfold on the video live stream.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to take a second to thank Dr. Chu and Dr. Bobinet for inviting me to come talk to you guys. Great honor, very surprised that they asked me to come. That means a lot. And I have to say a quick shout out to my friend, Britt Johnson, who's my MedX kind of drug dealer, I guess you'd call her. And more importantly, a good friend of mine that's given me encouragement and support. So enough mushy stuff. Let's get to the good stuff here. As she said, I'm consider myself one lucky patient. I started off in life, as soon as I was born, as a newborn, I displayed some fairly disgusting symptoms, my mom called it. And between that and the size of my head, they thought I had water on my brain at birth. So they sent me to the hospital, had my first MRI, which was foreshadowing the hundreds of MRIs, basically, I've kind of had since then through all my joints. Luckily, though, it turned out I never had water on my brain. Better lucky than good, they say. I was also born with hip dysplasia. Never had any symptoms until my early 20s, except for I run and walk like a duck. Feel free to look, please don't point and laugh because it hurts my ego. I don't like that. So I also contracted spinal meningitis when I was 6 and 7 years old. Unfortunately, about 5 or 6 other people in my neighborhood also contacted it at the same time, which brought out the health department, grounded my dad, who was a military fighter pilot at the time. Headaches were horrible. Never ended up in the hospital, and I never knew how lucky I was until high school when a friend of mine contracted it and ended up dying from it. So I didn't know, up until then, I didn't know you could. I just thought it was massive headaches. Like Dr. B said, I can't get this to work. This is actually my left wrist. 2003, I fell rock climbing about 10 feet only. I should say too, jumping ahead because I only have 5 minutes. I have a lot more in between the spinal meningitis, but this is the next big thing. This is my introduction to being an e-patient. The bill we got, because I had no insurance, was just outrageous. I had $8 bag of ice, which was literally somebody taking the apples out of a bag and filling it with ice from the hotel across the street and giving it to me. Now, because of the break, though, the doctor put me in the soft cast and a hard cast, so the ice packs were doing no good, but I still had to pay for them. They charged me $20 for a pill, regardless if I took it or not, because the doctor wrote as needed, so I was going to be charged for it. Now, through rudeness from the hospital, a lot of research, a lot of asking around, I found out I had the right to have my account audited, which from somebody from billing, but was also a nurse. Luckily, for me anyway, she told me I reminded her of her grandson. And as we all know, grandmas are great and let you get away with everything. So that helped me out. And we got the bill down to roughly what my dad figured they would charge his insurance. So we ended up paying it, and there was absolutely no worry about the hospital getting their money. As a person without insurance, this country blames us for the high cost of insurance, but really we're the ones paying full price when everybody with insurance gets the discount. At least that's my personal opinion. Roughly a year later, I had my second surgery to remove the plate. It was in an outpatient surgery center in downtown Boise, where I'm from. Oddly enough, my fifth and sixth surgeries, which I'll talk about here in a second, was at the same place. This place was the fee for the same place, which is about 5 years in between, stayed exactly the same. You never see that in healthcare, so that was a good thing. Also, my surgeon at the time for the second surgery was incredibly helpful as far as bill, because my insurance, I did have insurance, but it was pre-existing, so the insurance company did not cover it, but very complete opposite with what the hospital treated me. Now, my third surgery was my neck. I ruptured a disc in my neck. My second surgery, the hand surgeon referred me to a rheumatologist, my first experience with a rheumatologist, who told me it was degenerative arthritis, because at the time, I didn't have any blood markers or any other signs of like rheumatoid or gout or some of the other common ones. They thought it was just from the tragedy of the surgery is what was causing it. I was also considering at this time to going back to school to get either a second degree in accounting or as a lawyer, because at this time I was a ski instructor, a political operative, and a delivery driver. I've had an odd life, let me tell you. And I knew I couldn't do that anymore physically, so I needed more of the 9-to-5 office, less physically demanding job, or so I thought anyway. Fourth surgery was my left hip. Like I said, some of this came from the hip dysplasia as a kid. Some of it got accelerated from my rock climbing accident because I fell and landed on my left hip. This one, though, I had to go to the University of Utah because the doctor down there was doing this thing where he was shaving the hip bone, which nobody in Boise was doing, and also nobody in Boise was doing the left or hip resurfacing, which is what I ended up having because my cartilage was so damaged, he couldn't do the original surgery or what he hoped for. I had insurance at this time through school. It was a paperwork nightmare getting, getting this approved. And the funny part was, it was going to be improved. There was never any doubt. It just, somebody wanted to fill a square that said, okay, my doctor here had the recommendation that says I need to go there. I mean, he could have colored it in like a second grader and they still would accept it. It was just an odd paperwork hurricane, as I like to call it. Fifth and sixth surgeries were on my knees, right and left knee. Like I said, the price for those at the center was the same. Unfortunately, though, my sixth surgery ended up being the Friday before I started my fall semester. I became hyper farsighted overnight. I woke up Saturday morning, could not read, had no idea, up to that point, had no eyesight problems whatsoever. Very scary, and also, as you guys know, you kind of need to read to go to school. So that was my first real bad side effect of the surgery. According to my surgeon, that was basically my way of winning the lottery, according to the odds, that it was just a combination of the drugs, the anesthesia and the drugs, and it was some minute chance that this could happen to a patient, and of course, it happened to me. 7th surgery, and this is my actual left shoulder pictures of the scope. I went in for a scope because I fell skiing, dislocated my shoulder while helping a friend of mine who had just recently had a stroke get back onto the skis. We were both ski instructors or ex-ski instructors, so we lived and felt most comfortable on the snow by far. I started out as a scope, but once he got in there, he discovered my bicep was basically severed from my arm. It's in a ball down here actually right now because he couldn't bring it back together. Most of the damage said he was old. He couldn't tell if it was from the fall though, if it was from the dislocation, or if it was some kind of arthritis disease, such as rheumatoid arthritis. But all he told me was that basically I damaged everything pretty bad except my rotator cuff, to give you some idea of what I did. Now, that's kind of the quick 5-minute version of my, e-patient medical history. I'm one lucky patient without a bunch of luck, running into great doctors, very much looking after me, not for their wallets, for the healthcare system. I wouldn't be here right now, and that's not really fair, though, to ask, our healthcare to be based on luck. That's just not right, I don't think. And that's something, unfortunately, I don't know what to do to design it yet, but it's definitely a problem I'm working on, or hopefully you guys will get there sooner because I've got some arthritis issues to deal with. So thank you very much. Hope you at least got something out of it, and appreciate you guys taking a moment, 5 minutes to listen to me. So next up, our next speaker is Amy Tenderich, hope I got that right, who is a blogger, journalist, and patient advocate who started diabetesmind.com after a diagnosis with type 1 diabetes in 2003. Her site has become a leading online destination for people with diabetes. She's a co-author with Dr. Richard Jackson of the Joslin Diabetes Center of Know Your Numbers, Outlive Your Diabetes. Amy has made it her personal mission to spur innovation in diabetes care that originates with patients. She penned an open letter to Steve Jobs that went viral in 2007, which ended up developing an international crowdsourcing competition called Diabetes Mind Design Challenge. That's hard to say quickly. Competition culminating in Diabetes Mind Innovation Summit, a unique annual gathering of diabetes stakeholders held at Stanford. Thank you. After this message, we'll get to hear from Amy.
Time to take another shout out to Twitter. If you are following this conversation online or on Twitter, Christopher Snyder, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag. E-patients and caregivers out there, what questions do you have for our speaker today? What factors enable you to be patient advocates? Healthcare providers, technologists, and researchers out there, how might we find ways for patients to work as partners in healthcare innovation? Tweet us your questions or responses, and we'll do our best to have them addressed during this class in the Stanford University School of Medicine course, Design for Health, for Thursday, May 29th, 2014.
Good evening. I would also like to thank Dr. Chu and Dr. Bobnet for having me here today. It's an honor to be here with the next generation of health and medical experts. And I'm super glad that you're here to listen to our patient stories and where we're going with all of this. So I'm sure that user-centered design is not an unfamiliar term to all of you. And also the terms patient-centered and patient-centric, which are huge buzzwords. But I have to say, in my experience, those terms are about everything but the reality of living with these chronic illnesses. And until we have a better understanding of that reality of the day-to-day challenges of living with compromised health, I don't believe that we will have better solutions. So that's sort of the starting point for my work. Oops, I'm going too fast. Back here. So I want to introduce myself, Amy Tenderich. As noted earlier, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2003. So I had just given birth to my third child. I had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a little baby. And I ended up in the hospital for a week. And they told me at first that I had type 2 diabetes, which even I, in my state of knowing nothing, knew wasn't right because I looked like I had just been liberated from a concentration camp. I had lost so much weight in the weeks going up to that. So it was a very, very unpleasant first year. I had these little people who were dependent on me, and I was trying to figure out this life on insulin, and felt like the only adult on the planet who was ever going to get this juvenile disease. It's a very intense illness, type 1 diabetes. Type 1 and type 2, same end game in terms of the damage that can be done to your body. But type 1, an autoimmune illness where your body doesn't produce insulin, and obviously you have to take it via injection or via devices. As you can see, I don't use a profile picture anymore. I like to show people what my reality is. This is a wireless insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor that I wear on my body every single day, every minute of every single day. So I actually was motivated to basically find information that was useful for people's real lives. And I went to the internet back in the day and found nothing but a bunch of really scary medical journal articles and just this onslaught of information that was not in any way patient-friendly. So that to me was the impetus to start my own site. And I had a background in journalism. I live here locally in the Bay Area and was a journalist in technology, and I wrote a lot about consumer technology. So it was somewhat of an easy switch. I sort of put my hat on and said, what if diabetes were my beat? And I was sort of lucky that I was diagnosed right at the time when blogging software, social media was sort of being born. So I started this site and immediately got a lot of attention, and we now call the site, so now it's a team of people, it's not just me, and we do advocacy work as well as the citizen journalism, and we like to call the site a diabetes newspaper with a personal twist, because it's all written by and for patients, and we actually look at like mainstream media headlines and try to sort of translate those into, every week there are contradictory headlines about what you should eat or not do with diabetes, and then you see the next week of research that came out and has the exact opposite information. So we try to sort through all that for people. And we do book reviews, and we do interviews with celebrities, and we just do all aspects of living with diabetes. And we're also very well read among the industry now, people, the pharma and device industry that caters to us because they've obviously, woken up to social media and the fact that patients have a voice. So that's exciting. And I would say, actually, the blog really serves 3 purposes. And I've also was instrumental in launching one of the biggest online networks for diabetics called Diabetic Connect. I'd say, information, and it's sort of like 24/7, interactive education, right? Even about things that a doctor couldn't necessarily tell you, like all the logistics of carrying around all your stuff. Insulin has to be kept cool, and there are a lot of challenges. Emotional support, obviously, because it's extremely important for people to, with this something as intense as diabetes, to find others who are living that same way. And then as a channel for advocacy. So that's what I really want to tell you today, is a little bit of a story of what happens when patients take the reins on, speaking out on these issues about the tools that are supposed to improve our lives. So I just wanted to also share with you, I'm very proud. We talk about patients having a certain level of credibility and being listened to as peers. It took me 9 years to get there, but we were recently named the #1 influencer site by the American Diabetes Association, and this ShareCare, which is another one of many sort of health online networks now that covers all this stuff. So, it's sort of a fight to get to the point where you have enough recognition that as a patient, you're being listened to as a peer. So I'm going to tell you my story about getting involved in design and device advocacy. So it was the year 2007, and my husband and I went out to a bar to get a little bite to eat and a drink. And I was sitting there, we were talking about the fact that it was the 100 millionth iPod had just been sold. So there was this big announcement that they had just, it's the 100 millionth iPod. And I was trying to test my blood sugar in this dark environment with this clunky device, and I couldn't see it, and I was struggling. And I said to my husband, this is ridiculous. Look at this wasabi green device that I have. Look how cool this is just to listen to music. It doesn't do anything vital to keep me alive, but it's customizable, it's small, I can have my name engraved on the back, it has a scroll wheel. Why isn't medical technology keeping up with this? Obviously the technology is there, so it's not a matter of it not being, feasible. It's just someone hasn't put these two things together. And so we started scribbling things on a napkin, and this is my simulated idea napkin I'm sure you're all very familiar with here in Palo Alto. So what this led to was, as mentioned earlier, this open letter to Steve Jobs, which was a post that went up on the day, I believe, when they announced the 100 millionth iPod. So what happened was, it was a call for these kind of consumer gurus of consumer design to get together with the medical R&D folks and start doing this better. We are wearing this stuff and carrying around with us. I mean, I'm telling you, my insulin pump goes in the shower with me. It goes into bed with me. This is something I live with every day. And the design was just so clinical and clunky. And obviously, no one had really thought through, the lifestyle aspects of it. So, that was really what the letter was about. It got picked up actually by Michael Arrington of TechCrunch. And from there, kind of ricocheted around the blogosphere, got picked up in mainstream media, including like Financial Times and The Guardian, Inc. magazine, CNET. It kind of went crazy. So it was this exciting kind of viral campaign that really started a national conversation about the medical device design world and how behind they were. So that was the impetus for us to launch this, what then was the first of its kind, crowdsourcing competition, innovation competition, just putting out the call to anyone. We were actually lucky. We got the California Healthcare Foundation ended up giving me a grant for this, and I became friendly with some people at IDEO Design here nearby, and they were on the judging panel for this, so they helped us organize the whole thing, but it was blog-based. We ran this competition for 4 years, from 2008, 4 years on, and really it was, we had thousands of dollars in prize money in order to get people's attention, and we promoted it at universities across the country and also across the world. So for 4 years running, we had every year, I think, over 120 submissions and it was kind of a who's who of the university world for sure. I mean, we had Stanford people, we had MIT, Northwestern, Johns Hopkins, Pepperdine, I can't even think of them all, and several design institutes in Italy, just incredible list of people who participated in this. And it was really interesting to see the kinds of things that came from people who were living with the illness themselves or who were caregivers and were dealing with the day-to-day. Some of this stuff was super simple, but it was like, oh, that's such a great idea. Why didn't anyone do that? So just to give you a little smattering of the kind of things that we got from this competition, some of these things have actually come to market. Many of them have, like the concepts have now, years later, we're fast forwarding to 2014, these things are really on the track. So this was our grand prize winner, this thing called Life App, which was basically an iPhone-based solution where you could actually test your blood sugar right. It would be a plug-in to the phone, and you would have the interface would actually be the phone itself instead of some other clinical device. That has now come to market in a variety of formats. Not this exact product, but it has come to market. This is a EpiPen idea for glucagon, which is still being developed. And some other simple things as well. I mean, apps that were more like game-oriented, which again now is sort of becoming a big thing, but back then it was like, what a great idea to do something for teenage girls to keep them motivated to check their blood sugar, and because teenagers tend to really, as you can imagine, fall out of their diabetes care and then end up in the ER, and there's a lot of kind of critical. They're actually the most likely to have dead-in-bed syndrome with type 1 diabetes because they just don't do what they're supposed to do. So, and then this thing is actually really fun. This was a group of design students at Northwestern University, and they won our most creative submission thing with this thing called Jerry the Bear. And it was a teaching tool for kids with type 1 diabetes. They've actually created a company, and this thing has come to market, and it is now being used in clinics, mostly on the East Coast, but they're spreading it out. And it has a website with like an interactive kind of community. It's really fun. We were very proud that they got a $5,000 prize from us, which then sort of gave them the kind of groundswell they needed for the university to support them and give them more money, et cetera. So again, this started kind of this national conversation that got picked up all over the place, got a lot of attention. And what happened is people really started coming out of the woodwork not only people who themselves wanted to give a contribution to the contest, but people at some of these big companies, but people at design firms started contacting us and saying, I've been saying this for years, or I want to get involved in this, how can I help? And we kind of realized we're really onto something. Another one here, the Chicago Tribune, basically calling out the industry. And so it started, gave us a unique chance actually to talk directly with this. It's only a handful of companies, maybe about 13, that are the kind of leading device manufacturers in diabetes. So then, after doing that competition for 4 years, and these kind of innovation competitions started to become more common. I'm sure you guys now see them all the time. There's big companies that have hundreds of thousands of dollars that are putting out these, the call for, innovative ideas. So we thought, okay, that was great. We started that conversation. We got the whole ball rolling. What can we do next to kind of continue this, this advocacy and continue to be on our soapbox about getting patient voices more integral to the whole process? So the idea came, and it was also but with support and help of Larry Chu, actually, because the first Diabetes Mind Innovation Summit we held here in conjunction with the Medicine 2.0 event. And now we've done it 3 years running. And it's sort of a somewhat intimate event, it's about 120 people, and really the idea is to bring in the different stakeholders in this disease state. So we bring in a group of activated patient advocates, which we pick by another contest that we do. And then we bring in top people in consumer marketing and also product R&D from all of these top companies. So I'm talking about like Sanofi, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Merck, Lilly. I'm sure there are familiar names to you guys. Novo Nordisk, Dexcom, Tandem Diabetes, the companies that make all of the leading diabetes products. And then we have FDA involved. We brought payers in. We bring in leading clinicians who are doing interesting things, who are many of them, some of them wear two hats and they're patients as well, so they have a lot of passion about this. And the idea is like we need to get these stakeholders in the room to talk to each other. Because if you ask pharma, they'll say, oh, FDA is like holding this all back, it's all their fault. The payers will say, well, it's the industry, they're so greedy, everybody blames each other. So we said, we're gonna get that out of the way, we're gonna bring these people together. And we've had this fantastic interchange at this event for the last years. But I want to go back just for a minute and ask you sort of what's wrong with conventional medical design, to kind of revisit the whole idea of what started this whole thing. So I don't know if anyone recognizes this, but I got to ask you, this is the first inhalable insulin product, came to market in 2007, didn't last very long. And you might ask why. And when I say what comes to mind, do these two pictures not have a lot in common? I mean, actually, this device that you just saw it's called Exubera, and we called it the bong, basically. That's what all the patients called it. It's the bong. It's like, I actually was at the American Diabetes Association big annual conference where they had this product theater, and they showed this video where this happy man is sitting in a restaurant, and he pulls this thing out and goes, and nobody looks, everyone's totally fine with it. I'm like, that's not going to happen. That is not, it's like, how do you carry that thing around? And then there was issues with the dosing. So I think every 2 or 3 units were in a little packet, and the packet had to be individually unwrapped and stuck into the device. And then you go, wait, no, that's not enough. I need more. Super inconvenient, just beyond poor design. It's also this hospital grade gray kind of beigey thing. And it's ginormous, and here's the problem. The company just was convinced that this was going to be a blockbuster because diabetics are going to come running because there's no more needles. So they invested what ended up being the most expensive flop in the history of the pharmaceutical industry. $28 billion went down the toilet with this product in physician education, in promotions, in all the stuff they do, prepping for what's going to be a blockbuster drug. And the thing was pulled from market. And the Wall Street Journal actually did a report where when they went to get feedback on the product, they asked doctors, not patients. And they, of course, handpicked certain doctors. And some of the doctors actually said, this product isn't designed very well, like it might be hard for patients to learn and use. But they ignored that because they were just sure. And that's really the problem. The legacy thinking is, first of all, that the customers are clinicians, not the people who are going to be out there living with these things every day. And that's a fundamental problem that we want to change. So now, again, fast forward, 8 years. Now I do a lot of consulting. I'm actually very privileged to be asked into some startup companies and different companies working on apps and also devices for my advice and my feedback on what patients might think of something. And the fundamental, it's such a no-brainer message, but I can't remind them that patients are people too. And I was just at a big diabetes conference of people who are in managed care, and I said, think about everything you just did in the last 3 days. You may have kids, you have stress, you've got family issues, you have places to be, you're late, your car broke down, now think of all of that, managing your blood sugar, like every 20 minutes you got to do something about it, and you have these meds you carry around, you have all these things you're supposed to be doing. It's a major challenge. And if you can't get your head around the fact that, we're consumers, we're people just like you, have all the same issues, and our jobs get in the way and social situations, plus a lot of people suffer with depression because of the burden of having to think about this all the time, and knowing that you're broken, you're not a normal person, you can't just exercise or take the stairs or do things like other people. It's, you need to have an understanding of that. So that is my core message, and right alongside that is design for life. Think about the fact that there's kids with type 1, we want to go swimming, we want to do all the same stuff that, other people do, and that these devices are going, as I said, to bed with us, in the swimming pool, in the hot tub, in the, in intimacy, they're going to be everywhere. So you really need to be aware of that. And the typical approach from the pharmaceutical industry was literally to design some sort of prototype that would sort of handle some kind of medical function. They would show it to doctors, and then once it was pretty far along being developed, they'd bring some patients in for like a focus group, and they'd say, okay, can you figure this out? Do you know what buttons to push or whatever? That's not the same as designing for life. It isn't. So, it's pretty obvious that social media has enabled all of this, given us a voice. And I just wanted to take a minute to point out, and I'm sure these numbers are already outdated, but these are 4 of the top online networks for people with diabetes, and it's 500,000 people, as big as Greater Las Vegas, and that's active people. That's not just people who are signed up. Like, the numbers of people who just clicked on there once are much larger. So, there are these online meeting places, and this is markets or conversations, is what they say now, right? The Clue Train Manifesto book. That people are out there talking about these devices, and are the stuff that I know that people in the industry get off of reading our blog and reading the comments is better than any focus group, because people are really out there living with these devices, and they're talking about the challenges they're having. Excuse me. So here's another quick example. We did a post about this new drug Victoza that comes in pen format about a year and a half, 2 years ago when it first came out. And quickly, it became like the default user forum for that drug, because people want to know what the real life, side effects are, what the real life concerns are. So they didn't want to go to if you Google it and it'll take you to the company website. That's not what people want. They don't want to see the marketing stuff. They want to find out what, people's real life experiences are. So, this is really kind of where people are congregating and talking very clearly about design issues. And then, of course, this laps over into the area of apps. And I just love this. This is another blogger in our community who's just hilarious. And she did this great post, "Don't be an app hole," which is basically a humorous take on the fact that so many apps are so useless. And don't design for what you think I should be doing. Design for something that you ask me that I would bring value to my life. And the problem in the area of diabetes is that everyone thinks the gold standard is just collecting all this glucose data and pushing it around. And, it still requires a lot of manual entry. And believe me, we have enough to do without, like, let me put in how many strawberries I ate. I can do that once and then I'm done. There was a report that came out recently saying that there are about 1,100 apps, I think, in the iTunes store right now for diabetes. And about 1.2% of people with diabetes are using those in any way, shape, or form. And the drop-off after a couple of weeks is like, people try it out and they go, this just adds more layers of complexity to my life, so I'm not going to use it. So, they're now predicting that by the year 2018, something like 24 million people will be using apps for diabetes because it's such a darn widespread disease. But in order for us to get there, there's going to have to be a lot more value coming out the other end on these software and on these apps that they're creating. So I just wanted to point this out. This is very recently a story in Forbes that really brings home the point that the promise of digital health to radically alter patient life with these conditions is, tremendous. But there's a big missing link. and that is the lack of standards and formats for health data that's captured electronically to work seamlessly within the life of a patient with a chronic condition. That's true for everyone, but in particular, if you have a chronic condition and you are, your life is sort of dictated by this illness, this whole design issue laps over so much into data now. And how are we going to visualize that data? How can we utilize that data? Can we combine it with other data? So again, if you have diabetes and all you have is glucose numbers, that's not very useful. If I have a bunch of glucose numbers, my doctor will look at it and say, oh my God, on Tuesday you were over in 300 blood sugar. What happened? I don't know. I don't remember. If I can't put my data from my pump, so I know that how much insulin I dosed, and I can't put together my food records and my exercise records, and I can't have the data from, you remember those two devices I showed you? They don't talk to each other, and that's really a bummer. They both have proprietary software that's completely, locked into, single use, basically. So here's an illustration right here from home at Stanford. Dr. Bruce Buckingham, who's also been a great supporter, who's actually our sponsor this year for the event. He took this picture in his own office where he's seen patients with diabetes in 2000, I think it was 2013, but nevertheless, nothing's changed. People come in with a variety of different glucose meters. They all have proprietary cords. Not even the cords are universal. They all have proprietary software. It's just a huge mess. And this is what he's dealing with every day. And I know from my own doctor, sometimes they just give up and say, go home and print it out, bring it next time. This should not be this way in this day and age. So, and we know this even more so because going into the 2013 Diabetes Mind Summit last year, we did a big online survey ourselves. So my group, we worked actually with the USC Annenberg School of Communication. They supported us on this. And we surveyed just under 800 very engaged patients, right? People who are really active online, who are busy, talking to each other in these communities. And there's a lot of information here, but I just wanted to summarize the fact that basically people were saying so many of these devices are just too much hassle. They're not helping me feel in control of my own care. And I don't get a big picture, a fuller picture, because of the sort of pieces of information that I have that aren't useful to me. And as part of that survey, we also collected about 3,200 written comments. We asked people to fill in a lot of stuff. And it was amazing how generous these patients were with their time and wrote a lot of stuff. But this is like distilling it way down. And these are the messages that came through loud and clear. I hate it that the interfaces are not user-friendly. I hate it that neither the software nor hardware work together and they're not integrated with Mac and iOS. And literally, this is a quote literally from someone, but so many people said this in different words. Vendors should quit with the proprietary shenanigans and make technology that will actually help patients and give them access to their own medical information. Hello, right? So out of this, myself and some of my colleagues started this movement called We're Not Waiting. It's a hashtag. If you look it up, you'll see a lot of stuff going on about We're Not Waiting. It was an outgrowth of our event last year where we had these discussions about, why can't we just start? There are a lot of people who are hacking and making their own solutions and creating their own devices and doing things with data. And it's like, we're just not waiting anymore. We're just going to move ahead with it. So it's patients and entrepreneurs really taking matters into their own hands, even sort of reverse engineering the protocols on some of these devices so that they can get the data and the algorithms out. And one of the core people who's working with this, working with me on this, is Howard Look. He's the CEO of a group called Tidepool, which is a nonprofit. They're located here locally. And they are actually building a cloud-based platform for diabetes data. And the idea is that they're building some very useful apps on top of that, and it would be an open system where others could build a variety of apps, based on this as well. So they're really trying to convince the existing device makers and also new companies to sign directly on with this open system rather than going the traditional route and creating their own proprietary, software with the cables that you have to use that only connect with their devices, et cetera. And I love what he said. It says the aim is to make diabetes data more accessible, intuitive, and actionable. And I put the word diabetes in orange here because you could just block that out and put health data, arthritis data, heart condition data, any condition. Basically, we're trying to make the data more accessible, intuitive, and actionable. And this is actually kind of an outgrowth of an earlier movement. I don't know how many of you are familiar with a man named Dave DeBronkart. otherwise known as ePatient Dave, who's also been very involved in the Medicine X event here at Stanford. He's been saying this at least since 2009. He started this whole "give me my damn data" movement, where in his case, he was told that he had a certain type of cancer, but the big issue for him was that when he went to the hospital and tried to get his own records, he was told he could not have access to that. And so he kind of went berserk on that and started working with all kinds of decision makers, and his own doctor actually worked with him and they ended up getting a lot of stories in the media, and he became sort of the poster child for this movement. So what we're doing is not totally new. It's just that we're like at the point where people are actually taking action and creating their own devices and platforms. So I just wanted to also kind of bring home the notion that this is not limited to diabetes. So this survey that was just released a couple of days ago, actually by a center, where they talked to, I think, over 900 people who were healthy adults and over 1,000 people who had a variety of chronic illnesses. And they all said, it's vital to have control over my own healthcare information. And I thought it was interesting. The findings indicate a disconnect between patients' desired access and control over their healthcare information and the healthcare system's availability of such connectivity. And also one of the big issues they talked about here was risk. And the majority of people said, they are willing to take that risk of privacy and whatnot. It's more important to them to actually have access to the data, and have it published in certain formats. That the whole risk notion is actually more on the industry side than it is on the patient side. So what does "we are not waiting" actually mean? The group of us got together and came up with this long list, but I'm going to give you just the highlights here. We're not waiting for others to decide if, when, and how we can access and use the data. We're not waiting to make it easier to get the data off the devices or to allow patients to have a choice in how they see their own health data, so visualization, big design issue, rather than being forced to use substandard software that's delivered with the device, which is where we're at right now. We're not waiting to build applications that focus on design and usability or to compel device makers to publish their protocols or to bring together the best and brightest minds from around the world to help make things better for patients. So I think if I could sum up what we want, we want our data. We want open versus closed systems. We want to be recognized as the end users, the customers, not just the clinicians. We want to have a voice in designing these tools for our illnesses because only we know what it's like to live with it every day. And we want to share our experiences with each other and with the industry and anyone who's willing to listen. So on that note, we at Diabetes Mind just launched an exciting new program. It's kind of like CNET for diabetes products. It's something we've been talking about for a number of years. It's a crowdsourced video review hub for diabetes products. We launched this just a couple weeks ago. We have about 30 videos up already, and we're basically asking people in the diabetes community, they have to be either living with type 1 or type 2 or be a caregiver of a child with diabetes, because that's where you're doing the disease care if your child has diabetes. So I just wanted to quickly show you an example of one of these sort of homemade product review videos.
Welcome to the Diabetes Mind Test Kitchen, where people who should know review products created to improve life with diabetes. My name is Ginger Vieira. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for about 15 years, and today I'm going to review Accu-Check's Fast Clicks Lancet device. So Accu-Check has the multi-clicks Lancet device, which looks very similar to this, and then this is the Fast Clicks. Both of those Lancet devices have a cartridge of 6 Lancets. So you're not dealing with anything sharp, and it just sits right in there, and you can change it 6 times before you have to actually take it out and put in a whole new cartridge. One of the biggest benefits to using this in terms of safety, especially for a child who's at school, is that you never have to touch anything sharp. What makes the Fast Clicks different than the multi-clicks is that you don't have to load the Lancet device so that it's ready to prick your finger. You have to put it in there, but you don't have to prepare it. Most Lancet devices, you have to do something. Usually it's pulling something back in order to make sure that the Lancet is ready to launch. In the Fast Clicks, it's always ready to launch. So it's one tiny step, but if you're in a rush to check your blood sugar, it's that much quicker. The Fast Clicks Lancet device costs approximately $20. I actually use the Fast Clicks with a Freestyle Light meter because I prefer that meter, but I prefer this Lancet device. One thing I wouldn't mind if they improved is to actually make it a little shorter. It doesn't always fit in the length of most diabetes kits too well. It's a little bit too long. So if they could shorten it, even just by that much, that would be awesome. But keep it skinny. If you have a glucose meter you really like, but you want to try a different Lancet device, like the Fast Clicks, talk to your doctor about getting a prescription particularly for the Lancet device. Every meter comes with their own Lancet device, but you can get this separate from the Accu-Check meter if you want to stick with the meter you're already using. I absolutely recommend Accu-Check's Fast Clicks Lancet device. So that's my review of Accu-Check's Fast Clicks Lancet device. Thank you for tuning in to the Diabetes Mind Test Kitchen, where people who should know review products created to improve life with diabetes. My name is Ginger. Please leave a comment, let us know what you think, and share this review with other people affected by diabetes. Thanks for watching. Thank you for tuning in to the Diabetes Mind Test Kitchen, where people who should know review products created to improve life with diabetes. My name is Ginger. Please leave a comment, let us know what you think, and share this review with other people affected by diabetes. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. So we think it's really fun, not only for us to share our experiences with each other, but it's a really great way for our community to actually, give feedback directly to the makers of these devices. We ask people to kind of keep it upbeat, but, talk about the downsides, talk about what you would like to see in these designs. We're pretty excited about that, and we've already started getting sort of interest and feedback from some of the providers, and we've basically told them that if they are happy with their review, they can license our little logo for free, and they can brag on the fact that it's sort of patient approved, so kind of fun. So I guess just to sum up, what we're trying to achieve with all these programs is a new engagement model for patient-centric design. Not just for the health establishment and the device manufacturers, but for all the stakeholders involved. And that's starting with patients, but not limited to them. So the things that we're doing are, in addition to the site that I talked about and the video program, are a series of events. The Diabetes Mind D-Data Exchange is sort of an outgrowth of the original summit. It's a smaller event where we literally bringing together these data entrepreneurs, sort of Howard Look and his peers, who are doing all sorts of exciting movement in the data area. We had the first event in November of last year, and we're having we're having it twice a year. So we're having one in June in San Francisco in association with the big annual American Diabetes Association conference that's taking place at Moscone Center. And then in the fall, we'll be having the 2014 Diabetes Mind Innovation Summit right here in this building in Berg Hall again. Again, with the support, generous support of Larry Chu and Dr. Bruce Buckingham and everyone at Stanford. So we're very proud of that, and want to extend our thank you for the Stanford community being so welcoming to this patient movement. Very much appreciate it. So that's where we're at, and it's always a work in progress. So every year we try to come up with new ways to address this issue. And that's it. Thank you so much.
You can see hip patient problem here.
Come over here.
We ready? Okay, quick, before we do questions, quick shout out to Intake Me from Los Angeles. They do a great patient chat on Twitter too. Carrie McKay from Canada and Heather Corini from Los Angeles, who is a fellow arthritis advocate and just got out of the hospital too. So glad she's listening and out of the hospital. Any questions? Let's start with some questions.
Thank you both. So I wanted to ask, you've been doing this for a few years now. Have you noticed as healthcare-related design services and products have been shifting to more like consumer models? A lot of it's coming to the Bay Area. Have you noticed any of the larger pharmaceutical or device manufacturers seriously considering like adopting newer formats or talking about standards? I mean, if I go on the web, I'm going to see most pictures are going to be JPEGs. You know what I mean? Things like this. Like, are they having these conversations now because of these things?
We're trying to sort of force them to, in the sense that we invite them and involve them in our events. But absolutely, there's been a lot of movement. I was saying to Dr. Bobinet before the class that it feels like, as a patient, you're kind of, just fighting along and nothing, like things aren't really changing. But when I look back now on where I started from, the array of devices that are available and the fact that they're in color and they're small, and there was something that came out called the IBG Star, which Sanofi then purchased, which actually was the first medical device ever that plugs directly into an iPhone. So it's a little, I should have brought it with me. It's a little, looks like a little USB stick. It's actually a functional glucose meter, and it plugs in, and then it had, as I showed you in the winning entry, and this was years later, the controller for it is on the iPhone. Now the problem is that Apple decided to move to iPhone 5, and they have a different port, so that product became obsolete, which is exactly, unfortunately, what the pharmaceutical industry was worried about. But I think they are very aware now that they're living in a new era. Pharma industry was slow to adopt social media, but now they're all frantically scrambling to be the leaders in social media. Another thing I was involved in was actually getting our patient community more connected directly to the providers. I worked with Roche in 2009. They kind of said, well, we're aware that there's this sort of online patient community that's really active, and how can we get closer to them? So my partner and I suggested that they actually host an in-person summit. So they did, for the first time, they did this thing called the Diabetes Social Media Summit, where they brought about 30 of us into their headquarters, which was very scary for them. And the first year was very contentious, but it was super successful. They actually changed some of their advertising campaigns and their patient assistance programs based on our feedback, which is pretty amazing. And they did that for a number of years running, and then some of their competitors realized that was a good idea, because they obviously got a lot of sort of kudos in the blogosphere, and a lot of, they then had a sort of an ongoing relationship with these patients where they had webinars on a regular basis, and we're getting all this amazing free feedback. So Medtronic started doing it, Lilly started doing it. So now there's, this sort of established kind of way for us to interact with them. In terms of standards, though, we're still struggling with that. There's a group in Canada, in the University of Toronto, at this eHealth Innovation Center, that's actually writing the standards, the IEEE and the low energy Bluetooth specs for this diabetes data sharing. And they're working with all the providers, but it's difficult to get them to sign on, because they feel like the data and the algorithms is their magic IP that's gonna, that's really necessary for them to succeed. So.
Let's go right over here.
Hi. One thing that really struck me about your talk was the idea of being able to have access to your own data. And one thing that I started thinking about was in terms of interpreting that data, because whenever I've been to the doctor for myself or with my mother, and I've seen kind of that file, and it seems almost impossible to interpret. So I partly feel that, like, even if I had access to that data, I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So how do you think that aspect should play into this growing movement for patients to have access to their own data?
That's a really great question, and I should have made that more clear. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So you're right. The problem is we get reams and reams of data, and we're like, what do I do with this, right? And there was sort of this, ideal that there was going to be some doctor on the other end who's going to be waiting there to get all this data, beamed to him, and they don't get reimbursed for that time, right? There's no incentive for them to spend hours looking over this data. So there is definitely been a big push to make the data more actionable. I mentioned it briefly. What a lot of companies are working on now are algorithms that would automatically identify patterns. So there is actually a meter called the Vario IQ, which is supposed to be like a smart meter that can tell you, like, you've been high in the afternoons between 3 and 5 p.m. for the last, X days or something, which is really great. And a lot of the organizations that are involved in our D-Data event are working on algorithms that would do just that would help you identify patterns and would actually be able to make therapy suggestions based on that. Because if it also has your dosing data, it can say, it looks like you need to use a higher ratio of insulin to carbs in the afternoons or overnight, or, so that you're actually, because for most patients, you're right, especially patients who are trying to just manage their blood sugar, it's not like they want to pore over all this data. We want to be able to have access to our own records so that we can do something useful with it. So that's really a big push right now, not just opening it up so that we can see the data, but actually being able to use it. And, again, the science and the math is there. It's just a matter of applying it the right way.
Let's do a quick question from Twitter first.
Okay.
This comes from Britt. She asks, how can patient communities with smaller collective voice relative to other communities get their ideas heard?
That's a great question too. It may even be easier if you're smaller, because like a rare disease is going to be, the whole community is going to be more encapsulated, right? And I would say it's just like anything else in life, like when you're looking for a job or, network. So, I took it upon myself to say, well, if I'm going to meet, I want to meet the movers and shakers in this industry. I'm going to start attending the conferences, the events. At the time, bloggers weren't let in. I was lucky I had press credentials, so I was like the first blogger to ever infiltrate the American Diabetes Association, their big conference. But now they're much more welcoming to people who have online voices. It's just about networking. Find out who are the leading national advocacy organizations, who are the decision makers in there, what are the leading companies that create the solutions for your disease, and get to know those people, and try to figure out a forum in which you and your peers as patients could interact with them.
No, like side note, there's 120 different versions of arthritis or fall under that umbrella. Some of them, like AS, are very small and don't affect necessarily a big portion of that 120, but then there's our rheumatoid arthritis that, there are millions of patients out there. So that's a big issue in the arthritis community, how to get our voice out there and how to get our voices under kind of like one voice and not 120 different voices.
Right, that's difficult. And there must be commonalities. I mean, we have the same issue with like type 1 and type 2 diabetes, or, the needs are different, but there obviously are commonalities where we can, work together, and we try to as much as possible.
Unfortunately, pain is the main commonality.
Well, there you go, if that's what it is, then rally around that,
It's the drawback. But,
yeah, sorry.
Right here.
How do you encourage people to contribute to the blogs? And do you have to sort of quality control to check that things they're saying aren't inaccurate or...
So you're talking about two different things. So a blog is a publication, as you know, that's written by one or more authors, where we put out, material, and then people comment. So there's the comments, which we do moderate. I think in the 8-9 years I've been doing this, I've only ever actually taken down maybe 2 comments where people were just being outrageously, ridiculously rude. If people disagree with us, we leave it up there, we respond, But what you mean is moderating on these networks, right, where you have, it's all user-generated content, and you have all these conversations going on, and that's one of the things that my group has also been doing, advocating for the legitimacy of those networks, because healthcare providers are very nervous that there's going to be all this misinformation, and people are going to go up there and learn all this terrible stuff, or they're going to come running into their doctor with some ridiculous thing that they printed out and said, I found this on a network, and and we said, that's kind of how life is. I mean, there's always going to be stupid things that get printed. But the nice thing about the internet, and I think these networks, is that it's the ultimate democratic model. So the community is pretty, is pretty activated and concerned. And they will just, jump. If somebody says something ridiculous like, oh, you should be eating more honey with diabetes, people will just jump all over them. So when I was working at Diabetic Connect, which was a site that quickly went from 10,000 to 20,000 to 500,000 people on there, we did have, we moderated and we went around, but we also found that we could deputize the most active users on that site, and they get these badges and stars, and we would contact them. We would sometimes have them actually proactively write like a rebuttal if somebody wrote something that we thought was completely off, and also. I think increasingly some of these networks, and Diabetic Connect is definitely doing this, they're bringing in the provider voice. So they have an agreement now with Joslin Diabetes Center, which is one of the leading centers, where they have CDEs, so certified diabetes educators, who do Q&As on there and who interact with people, and they're able to then chime in on discussions where people might be talking about something that's a little medically questionable. So there's different ways to, to sort of vet the information.
Any more?
So this is more of a. I'd love to ask patients and stuff. Less of a industry reflection kind of question, and more of a like sort of anthropological design related question. You referenced quickly that a lot of the devices were essentially just adding more work. And I wonder if, I'd love your thoughts on this. I'm going to throw out a hypothesis here. Like, are we just in a phase in consumer healthcare and design in general, where we think we need to be giving people all of this control and apps and ways to check and monitor and do this, when we're really just kind of giving them more stuff to do. And you yourself, you kind of mentioned, like, look, we have lives designed for life.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I wonder this because I go to all these other design-related lectures and talks around the Bay Area, and so few people come to that conclusion, like design for the life. They're all designing for the screen. They all want people to touch and interact and be in control rather than release them from that. Do you know what I mean? And I'd love your thoughts on this and where you find that intersecting with healthcare. I think health is like the place where that really needs to kind of break out of that.
Yeah, comes to life. So it's interesting. That goes back to, I think, the Clayton Christensen quote where he said, don't design for, like, what people don't want to do. Like, so same thing. So for the first couple of years when I was at the ADA and they had this huge expo, it's like, it's like Comdex or something, and all this money and these fancy booths, and they're all talking about data visualization and look at all these amazing graphs and it's colored and it's this, and I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I'm not an engineer. I don't want to have this, have some course on this data, visualization. I want the data to help me tell me something, So you're right. I want it to be simpler. I want the device to, make my blood sugar stay in control, in an easier way that has fewer steps for me. But I think there's kind of two sides to that. I mean, the physical devices we can't get away from. So I need something that's going to put insulin into my body. I could do it like more manually, old school with with a shot, but I prefer not to. So I need that device, and I also need something to monitor my blood sugar. And then it's like, okay, the way that I'm going to interact with these devices should be as easy as possible and not be too complicated, right? That's what I meant when I said, make it simple and comfortable and customizable and all of those things, so that it's not just adding more complexity. So here's an interesting example. These continuous glucose monitors are very new. I mean, they've only been out on the market for a couple years. There's only 2 of them on the market. And actually, they're totally in a marketing war right now. I just found out today that they're doing this AT&T, we'll pay you to switch thing. It's really crazy. But, people think, oh, continuous glucose monitor, that's going to make your life so easy. You won't have to do, tests anymore. People also think like an insulin pump is like, oh, you're done. No. Actually, an insulin pump is more complicated than taking shots. It is. It's more complicated. But it's worth it in that sense because I can control the level of insulin that's going into my body better. So it's worth that extra layer of learning how to use the temporary basals, and there's a lot of buttons and codes, and it's more comfortable. You set different background basal rates. It's quite complicated, actually. But the reason that it's worth it is, for example, if I took a shot of insulin for my dinner, and then we decided we're all going to go out for a walk, and I have taken a shot, I'm screwed. I would have to eat and drink, and I'm like, oh my God, I have way too much insulin on board for me to do activity right now. I'm going to drop low. But if I have a pump, I can shut the pump off because it's a continuous drip, right? Or I can, do what we call a temp basal, so I go back. So in other words, it's more complicated, but it still gives me value. But a lot of these apps, I think they're complicated and they're just not providing value. The trade-off isn't there. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but okay. All right. I think we need to wrap up, right?
Yeah, I think we're in extra credit territory now by a few minutes, actually. So thank you for listening to us, asking questions, and just having us here. This is great fun and honor, and I think I speak from both of us here that really appreciate you listening, taking the time to listen.
For sure. And the fact that there is a class designed for health is this very encouraging sign, and thank you all for signing up for it. I think it's wonderful. Yeah. Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this edition of Stanford Medicine X Live. We'll see you back here on June 3rd, 2014 at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we'll discuss the topic Medicine X, the Student Perspective, moderated by a panel of students from medical schools and academic institutions across the country. You won't want to miss the next episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. As a reminder, this program is made possible by support from the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality. If you haven't yet done so, please please take a moment to follow our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/Stanford Medicine X, so you can continue the conversation online and stay informed of program updates. From all of us here at Stanford Medicine X, we want to thank you for joining us today and remind you to join us again next Thursday, June 5th at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another edition of Stanford Medicine X Live, featuring a new healthcare design class from the Stanford University School of Medicine called Design for Health. Next week, we are featuring Nick Dawson and Dennis Boyle with e-patient Emily Bradley. Also, please don't forget that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier Patient-Centric conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our regular registration pricing is still available until August 1st, 2014. For all of you out there taking time to tune in with us tonight, thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. A special thanks to our guest speakers this evening. From all of us at Stanford Medicine X, we'll see you next time.